Hello, my friends. It's Andy over the Andy Falco Show, coming to you live from Brea, California. One of the places that, at least so far, we have not seen any writing. It is, oh, wow, what a. Can we start 2020 all over again? Can we go back and can we actually maybe skip 2020 and go from 2019 to 2021? I think we probably should do this. But there's got to be some positive. I know that in the end, as with everything, as when I went through a near bankruptcy, when I went and I lost nearly $1 million, if not $1 million, in a bad business deal, that there's always something good that comes out of it eventually, out of this whole thing. The subject matter I'm going to be talking about in racism is a difficult one. And I really thought long and hard over the last 3 days about talking about it and whether I would actually even talk about it, because who am I? You know, I am a white, Hispanic, Irish, American Indian, German, police officer, American, and all those things. And that's all the things I put in the title. What do I know about racism? And I know nothing about African-American, being an African-American in our United States or in our world. And so, but I do have some experiences in this world. So just in regard to my experience from my standpoint, I think the best thing my dad taught me, if anything, and again, we didn't have that great of a relationship, my dad and I, and he was very harsh, and there was never any time, hey, Rich, nice to see you. There was never a time where we said, I love you, one way or another, my mom and I, nothing. That was not anything that was in our upraising. And quite often my dad, who was, his last name is Jimenez, but he said Jimenez. My whole family said Jimenez. Was the first sign once I learned when I was in high school that the name was actually pronounced Jimenez. And I go, how come we never said Jimenez? And my dad said, well, you know, I was in World War II and I was in the Army. And if you went by Jimenez, then, you know, there was they thought you were Mexican. And so if I said Jimenez, then it was much easier. I also didn't have to explain how to spell it. And so there was already, you know, this thing like, oh, you know, that's just what you do, you know, when you you change your name so that you don't get any grief. And so there's that part, right? So that started early. My dad also was a bit of a bigot. I don't know that he was racist. You know, sometimes I say he was racist. Sometimes I say that he was just like Archie Bunker, that everybody of another race, he used that name instead of their name. So our neighbors were from Hawaii. So he said, hey, you're going to the Hawaiians. What are the Hawaiians doing? The Hawaiians are parking their cars on top of their lawn again. What are those Hawaiians doing, right? It was never referred to as, I don't even know their name, because we referred to them as the Hawaiians. Down the street were the Mexicans, right? The Mexicans also parked their cars on their lawn and changed the oil in the street. So he called them Mexicans are changing the oil in their street again. And then, you know, the blacks or the Russian Jew that he worked for, none of them had a name. They were all their race or the religion. And that's how I grew up. It was just the way that it was. And I never really thought that much about it. Where even earlier in my life that I, again, was affected by it, but really wasn't affected by it, was that my dad used to call me Jap. Again, my dad was in World War II. It was a war against the Japs and the Krauts, right? That was where the war was. And then you had the Spics and you had all this guy. This is the way I grew up, right? But because my eyes are kind of slanted and squinty, he used to call me Jap. And so when I woke up in the morning, he goes, hey, Jap, what's going on? And so my entire life, I was either Jap or Dig. I was not Andy. Dig, the reason he called me Dig is because I used to love to explore in the backyard. I always thought someday I was going to find treasure. So I always dug these holes in the backyard looking for, you know, bones and gems. And then I would even hide treasure and then make a map on how to find the treasure. So I was always digging in the backyard. So if he wasn't calling me Jap, he was calling me Dig. I'm sharing all this with you because I want you to know that I've never really thought anything about being called a name or somebody being racist towards me. And he also taught me never to be a whiner. Don't cry about anything. Don't show your weaknesses. I used to get very bad spankings from time to time using belts and sticks and 2x4s. And I had a brick, I think, thrown at me one time. But if I ever cried, that was it. That was it. He would be so pissed if I cried or if I showed emotion. And so early on, and again, this is not a woe is me. It's nothing. I'm just trying to share with you that I don't know of this thing called whining about about things when people call you names. So as I get into the police department, I was called Mexican, hey, Mexican, go handle that call, or Mexican, go do that. And I was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to go handle that call. Like you never really thought about it. When there were officers that when Mexican suspects were running from them, they would get on the radio and they'd say, hey, we got 3 Rudies jumping over the west wall, and I'm in pursuit of Rudies. And that was normal. I mean, we really never thought anything of it. And so that's kind of the thing that the way that I grew up in coming into the law enforcement and police work. But as a police officer, I can't say that in Anaheim Police Department that I ever witnessed a police officer being racist towards somebody. I never witnessed it. Did I see it around us and other departments? Yes. There was a very famous Long Beach incident where a black police officer, I think he was out of LA. I think it was a black police officer out of LA who went to Long Beach, almost purposefully trying to bait a Long Beach officer into arresting him. It was this weird dynamic thing. And what ended up happening, getting caught on video, because back then it wasn't like if everybody had a video. If you had a video, you had to purposely have a video running, and it was more difficult back then. This was in the mid to late 80s, from what I remember. And what happened was the cop took the officer who was being stopped for some reason or another, driving while black probably, and took his hands behind his head and then pushed him towards a plate glass window at a storefront. And the suspect officer, or the officer that was being patted down, the black officer, again, then he was not a civilian, but he was a off-duty. There we go, off-duty officer. He hit his head against the window and then caused the whole thing to break, and it went down. It was a whole controversy because they had it all on videotape, and it all turned into a big thing. So those things were happening. Then, of course, we had Rodney King, and then everything began to change. And so that is my experience. But as far as me and the officers I worked around, never had really seen anything. I had a roommate, which was a black officer that I went to the academy with. He began living with me. He had a white wife, blonde, Caucasian wife. They were going through a separation. He moved in with me. We were really good friends. Again, we went to the academy together. And I can't say that anytime I hung out with them and we used to go to the gym together all the time. We used to hang out together. I never witnessed him being targeted in any way as far as being black in Orange County or doing anything. So I've never found myself being a witness to anything like that, and found it so like it was one of these weird things that kind of happens somewhere else. It happens in LA, maybe it happens in Long Beach, but never really had it happen. However, when you go on a call as a police officer, one of the first things that happens, whether you're arresting a Mexican or arresting somebody from Guatemala or African American, and even sometimes Middle Eastern or Armenian, we were always, based on what they were saying, we were only contacting them because we were racist, right? We were only arresting them because we were racist cops. And my answer was always no. The reason you're being arrested is because on the way here, I was given the description of a male black wearing what you're wearing, with the last name of whatever the name was, and that you were in this location. And then I saw you, and now I'm arresting you. I'm not arresting you because you're black. You're black, and you match the description of a black suspect, right? And so, but that was the one thing that was really consistent. Now, anytime we would catch somebody, we would corral somebody, I would bite them with my police dog, which again was up to 80 people in the city of Anaheim. It was always because I was racist. And that's the only time that really became a factor. And I don't ever believe that there was any time that I was racist, only against white people. Really, only against white people. The only time that I stopped somebody because of their color, it was because a white person was in the wrong neighborhood. And normally it was because they were there to buy drugs. So if I was ever racist, it was always against white people because they didn't belong in Little TJ in Anaheim, nor in the West End in the black area picking up narcotics or a prostitute. And so whenever I stopped anybody because of their color, almost always it was because they were Caucasian. All right. So I wanted to lay that out again, as usual, because I think it helps to have a little bit of foundation of how I was raised, that I never really thought about it when somebody called me Mexican or, whatever, or called me racist. I never responded. I never really took it to heart or was offended by it. I just kind of went, no, that's your problem. It's not mine. If you think I'm less because of who I am or because of where I was born or because of what blood I have in me or DNA or genetics, It really is not my problem because I know who I am. I know what I've done. I know that I do have my weaknesses and my strengths, but because you called me a Mexican means nothing. Because you called me, because you say, and there were people that said, you only got this job because you were Mexican, right? There were guys that would say that. And so if, again, I go, no, but if you believe that, that's not my problem. That's your problem. And so it was never one of those things. And so this is going to become important, I think, later on as I get further into my discussion, because I find it hard to have discussions when it does come to talking about racism, because there's people that get very sensitive and very emotional when we begin to get into this area. And it's going to be really important later on. All right. So I hope I laid that foundation that's really important. And again, these are my views, and I hope that it comes across well. I know that there's many people that are probably going to be offended at some of the things I say, especially when I get into the part about politics, about being a Republican and talking about liberals, that this is kind of where things begin to go haywire in the discussions I've had on Facebook. But I hope that bringing this out and maybe understanding what I believe is important in discussing racism, I may be wrong, but I also think that I'm right. All right. And so we're going to get into that area. All right. So in attending to my notes here, I do want to address obviously what is going on in our world right now, that we have a huge problem right now. And whether or not the officer who put his knee on George Floyd's neck was racist, he sure looks kind of like a guy who would be racist, right? You see the picture, you see what he looks like and that kind of stuff. And looks are deceiving, but I often said, I still don't know. I don't know that he's racist in the sense that he did it because he's white and he's black. Again, it sure is possible. He has 13 to 14, something like that, complaints against him for use of force under color of authority. Or all of those black people, that I have not heard. If they are all black, then there's a really good chance that he's racist. And the only reason he did is racist. I do understand now also that those two work together, George and the officer who is now a suspect and arrested and a murderer, that they worked together in the same nightclub. So what is going on there? What is it that was going on with that dynamic? And did he not recognize him as the guy that he works with in the same thing? And so there's some very interesting things about that. And we don't know enough about that. We do know, based on all the angles, that there is no reason why he wasn't arrested on day one, based on now knowing that the DA, the investigators, the chief of police, the FBI, the DOJ, the governor, the mayor, all had this information prior to Friday, right? This happened on Monday, and they didn't arrest him until Friday. Really? Did it take that long? It did not take that long to review all those videos and the witness statements and the facts behind the case. And that is really where they let the black community down, I think. And they could have done a much better job of doing that. And so we're going to revisit that too. But when it comes to what's happening now, I understand why the black community is upset. I truly understand. And I'm not sure why that doesn't get across when I've had a few discussions over the last 2 days through Facebook and Twitter and some of the other platforms where I've tried to say, I am with you 100%. But this violence is totally unreasonable. And there's nobody stepping up in the black community to stop those people. And I'm not saying those people and black people, but the people that are doing violence, because it's not just black people, right? We see white people, Asian people, Mexican people, all committing violent acts and looting and breaking glass and windows and catching police cars on fire. Those people, those individuals are not, as far as I feel, protesters against what happened to George Floyd. Those are opportunists who are looking for opportunity to cause chaos in our world and to get a bunch of crap for free. Those are two separate things, right? And so I've been looking for African-American leadership to step up and to get out there and tell everyone to stop, and to get other black individuals and white individuals and all the other races who are really pissed off about what happened to George Floyd, and to get those other folks out of the equation And it would be helpful to work along with law enforcement, along with politicians, to go against those people that are causing the damage and the death and destruction and damage to property and theft of all the clothes and the televisions that they're taking out of Target, for instance. That it would be a way better way of going about this. But no, they're joining in and they're saying it's okay. You got Michael Moore, Michael Moore, the director of all those stupid movies and documentaries, who is encouraging this rich guy who's living in a fenced-in wall, who has nothing of this. None of this is impacting him, and he's encouraging the destruction of the building. He's encouraging people to go out and to loot and destroy. And it is the craziest thing. Not one person on the liberal side and the Democratic side has gone again and said, listen, Michael Moore, we don't need your freaking help. Now, don't just shut your trap and really use your platform to get the message out. It is the racism that we need to fix. This is not helping racism and the problems with racism, right? And that is our biggest problem. And there's nobody stepping up. And so that is the problem. And that's what the thing I want to address. And when we're talking about racism, the looting, the catching the police cars on fire, the burning the buildings down, throwing Molotov cocktails, doing all this other crap has nothing to do with racism. It's only increasing the problems of racism. And those of you that are Black leaders, those of you that want change in this world, need to step up. You really do need to step up. Liberals need to step up, and they're not. They're encouraging it. They want the chaos. And I know that this is where I'm going to get into trouble. But they surely aren't making it stop, right? You have a Democrat mayor in Minneapolis who said, let them burn down the police department. It's not that big of a deal. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You set the snowball rolling, right? You really got your hands dirty. He needs to be responsible and held responsible for the chaos that is now being seen across the world, because he said it's okay. Right? He's one of the first people that says, and you got other people. You got Michael Moore saying it's okay, and now you got a number of other people saying it's okay, and now we have chaos. Right? It starts with that police department that they allowed to get burned down in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's where it started, along with a number of other things. Right? But I can look at that one thing where I say, you know what, they're just venting. No, because that's not what's going to help with the issue of racism. It's not. Because you got a bunch of people who are like going, well, I'm not sure about this, but I sure see a lot of Black people breaking windows on Target. I see a lot of Black people setting police cars on fire. I see a lot of people. They're only seeking the Black people. I see the white people. I see the Asian people. I see the Mexican. But the people that are kind of on the fence and saying, you know, I'm not sure what to believe or what to think, but I sure do see a lot of Black people doing this stuff. Is it helping? No, it's not helping. So I had a discussion on a post today, and I normally don't comment on somebody else's post in Facebook, and I do see a lot of comments coming up. I'm going to get to the comments in just 1 second. I'm sorry, because I know there's a lot going on out there, and I know that there's things that you people. I keep saying you people, and I know when I say that, it sounds like that's a racist thing. See how sensitive I am to saying the wrong thing, but I want to see what all you're saying. Some of my favorite people are saying some good stuff. There's a lot of stuff happening right now, and I know, and I can see it. I got on the TV on this other side of the ring light that's going on here. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. But I want to talk about this discussion I had earlier. And I thought in the beginning it was a really healthy discussion, right? A post was put up about how Trump didn't say anything about George Floyd on during his WHO press conference. And I didn't want to comment. I had to comment. I just said, because so this is all because of that. Everything that's happening based on what it was said, because there was another one about something else about Trump. So 2 in a row about Donald Trump is the cause of all the stuff that's going on, because he said nothing about George Floyd or the cops or the unrest or the race. He said nothing during the WHO press conference. So, but the WHO press conference was about the WHO. And so that's why I just talked. I said, listen, he talked to the family before the WHO press conference, the family of George Floyd. He talked about it after the WHO press conference. He unfortunately he tweets a couple things that kind of are not that great, but because you then have to go decipher them for the liberal media, because the liberal media wants to choose to say he said he's going to go out there and shoot people. No, that's not what he said, but that's where they're going to go with it, right? And so it causes us grief. but he was talking about it before. He talked to the family before. He talked to people, in the United States and in the world after, and he sent the FBI down there. He did a whole bunch of stuff. But based on this thing, because he didn't mention it during the WHO press conference, he's obviously racist. And so I had this discussion in the beginning. It seemed to be a very good discussion, but however, things were brought into this discussion that were just blatantly untrue. Right, just blatantly untrue, and there was too many for me to go into now. And so my response was, no. This is what happened. This is the chronological event, and chronological events, especially when events are important, because there was discussion about, well, he didn't do this until that. No, that's not what happened. He talked to the family before the WHO, and then MLK was brought up. And then, because I talked about, no, they need to come in. They came in there weak. They came in there late, right? The governor of Minnesota turned down help from Donald Trump. Donald Trump, before the WHO press conference, called the governor and said, hey, do you need help? We can send some troops. We can send some National Guard up there. And the governor turned him down. Right. And so that it was all part of that discussion. Said, but listen, he tried to send National Guard up there, but the governor turned him down. And so, well, it wouldn't have done any good, right? If he would have sent troops, it would have been worse. So that's not true. Overwhelming presence is much more difficult for a group of these Antifa and people that were, burning the police cars. If you have an overwhelming, what was happening was the cops were overwhelmed because they didn't have enough, because they started too late, because they were already setting cars on fire. They're already setting buildings, and now you're coming at it from behind. And that is a horrible position to be in as far as law enforcement is concerned and as far as military is concerned. When you're already coming in after everything begin to explode, and now you're coming in, it's way more difficult. What you want to do is be ahead of the explosion to smother the explosion. Whenever somebody is out of control, when we're trying to arrest them, what we do is what's called swarming them. We surround them and we overcome them with numbers and much better. Well, then the response was, well, we proved that was not a good thing to do back when MLK was marching. And I said, well, you're talking about two different times. Back then, it was a completely different world. Blacks weren't able to vote. Blacks weren't able to drink out of the same water fountain. It was a much different world back then, where the cops were not as equipped, as trained. They were very racist back then. Many of them were in KKK, and you had a completely different dynamic in the 50s leading into the 60s. During that time, you can't use those two comparisons of what we have now. We have much better tools. We have much better weapons. We have a lot more less lethal options than we did back then. We had dogs and guns and water cannons. That's all we had, right? Now we have much more. We have shields. We have protection. We have tanks that have push bars on top of them. The dynamics are completely different, and to use that comparison is completely ridiculous. You've got to be kidding me. Right. But the numbers are so out of whack now, because now we're coming in from behind, where if the governor would have said, yeah, you know what, let me get some help in here. Let's kind of just overwhelm the situation so that we can tamp it down before it gets crazy. And you can do it with less violence. You can do it with more. You can have actually more officers that are undercover in the crowd trying to figure out who the agitators are. That has never been talked about. You're instead now having to dress what would be used as undercover officers, because you don't have enough officers. You're not able to use undercover officers in the crowd to find out who are the agitators and taking them out of the situation. None of that is able to happen because they're overwhelmed and there's not enough. And so they're too late to the game with all this stuff. And so that was my argument about you can't compare the two, completely two situations. And then also you don't have somebody like MLK, Martin Luther King, right? We have nobody like Martin Luther King who would go out into the crowd. He would personally, right? One of the strongest men with the biggest cojones than anybody that ever seen on the planet. He would go out there and say, listen, we're not going to have violence. You need to calm down right now. And he would be out there, not sitting behind a podium in a conference room at City Hall. The Atlanta governor or mayor who had a really great speech, right? Everybody's go, oh, what a great speech she did. No one out there in Minnesota, in Atlanta, in California, in New York, but wasn't listening to her, right? It was a great speech, Where was she? She's behind a podium safely in City Hall. Where her ass needed to be was out there in the middle of Atlanta, out there on the street, telling people, you need to knock this crap off right now. And all of you right here, or who want a peaceful demonstration, need to help me to get those idiots that are breaking windows, catching things on fire, throwing Molotov cocktails under control. And we are going to help the police. We're going to help the troops get these people under control because we want a peaceful demonstration. We want to show the world that we really want to stop racism because those people are what's causing us more grief. But did she do that? No, she got her ass, behind a podium inside of a building. All right, I'm going to take a break because I'm getting all worked up here, and my son's sitting here watching. He probably thinks I'm a nut, but he's listening to me very intently. Or he's just waiting for me to stop so he can go back to playing, games. All right. Let me see. So sorry. I need to calm down. Other heavens, I heard looting in Long Beach. Yeah. In Huntington Beach. I've seen it. Thank you, Nobby. That's the nicest thing you said to me, but no. I have too many skeletons in my closet. You think Trump was bad? I have way more that I couldn't do that. Looting and fires and yep, it's everywhere. It's now spread because they just did not stop. But I watched a live stream today and witnessed a looter attack another looter. And literally, yeah. Well, you got a guy. Is that the guy with the sword? You had a guy with a sword who got attacked, and I don't know if he lived, but they kicked the snot out of him. Now, the only part I saw was black people kicking the snot out of a white guy. And in the beginning, it looks like, oh, they kicked the snot out of a black guy that was in the group. Yeah, and somebody was kind enough to put the actual footage that he was running around with a sword. Now, whether he was trying to protect himself or property or cars, whatever, I don't know. But there's a lot more to it than that. So I'm not sure if that's the one you're talking about with the sword or not. Setting cars on fire. Both APLE, she had said in the comments about him being guilty. I thought that they would do that until after the internal affairs investigation was over. White man and a black man do damage to property. Yeah, it's just out of control. And none of it is about racism anymore. None of this violence, none of this stuff that's going on right now is about racism. Yeah. Again, you got Al Sharpton. Thanks for bringing his name up because where is he? Why isn't he out there stopping the violence? This violence has nothing to do with racism. And I know he said it 100 times. I'm going to say it over and over again because it is the dumbest thing. And nobody, you got Mike, again, I don't know, you got a white guy named Michael Moore who's telling all the black people to burn things up. What is that? And why are they listening to him? Biden's not doing it. Where's Biden? He's done nothing. Nothing. He's not showed his ugly face to say, hey, people, which he probably would not be able to get out the sentence and say that. He would be able to say nothing that would cause things to go down. So to end my discussion about that post, or the discussion on the post and then all the comments, in the end is what always happens. And I say always, I rarely say always and never, but what seems to always happen when you begin to make inroads, at least based on my discussion and things I was pointing out, because they were all fact, right? Everything that I was making comments on was to give facts, because they were always saying, well, not always, they were saying these things that were just simply untrue, and I was coming back with facts. So in the end, when I was able to address all of the things that they thought were true, and to show them, if you just look here, if you look here and you remember this and you do this, you will see that what you're saying is not true. And it is not, none of it was true. How it ended was, well, you're an asshole. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. You're an asshole and you're a Trump lover. That was all that's how it ended, right? There was nothing ever that said, you know what? You're right on a few of those points, but I'm going to have to wait and see based on what happens in the future, whether you're right on those other things, right? That could have been a really good ending of that discussion. Or, you know what? Even though I see what you're saying, Andy, I still have my feelings, and I feel strongly that the Democratic leadership is going to do the right thing. Something like that. No, that's not how it ends, right? When I come up and say, MLK was a fantastic leader at this time because he would go out there with the people, stand on the street and say, peace. Do not commit violence. Do not commit destruction of property. That we are going to hold a peaceful rally. And what had happened with that peaceful rally? Blacks got the vote. We ended up eventually having a black president. We ended up, getting rid of all the white, water fountains. segregation. People could sit wherever they wanted to on the bus. Because why? Because you had a leader who was willing to put his ass out there and eventually got him killed. I know, eventually was this, I know, but you had somebody with some balls to get out there and be a part of the process of keeping things calm, because calm protests, calm discussion and back and forth and negotiation and all of these things. You bring Robert Kennedy into the mix, who also was a big promoter for getting rid of racism and to allowing blacks to vote and do all the things that everybody else did. Right? You had these people that were willing to get out there with the people and walk with them. But you didn't see none of that leadership now. I saw one lady, a nurse in New York yesterday. She was standing out there, putting her hands up, not saying, hands up, don't shoot. Her hands were up and saying, stop the violence. You needed more people facing the people that were protesting with their hands up saying, stop the violence. Not hands up, don't shoot. You need more of that. I understand what your message is when you say stand up, don't shoot, or I can't breathe, whatever that is. Continue saying that. But you needed a lot more people with their hands up saying stop the violence. I saw one nurse in New York in the streets yelling at the people to stop the violence. One. She wasn't a leader. She was a citizen. She was a nurse wearing her scrub. She just came off of work and she's out there telling people. One person. I have not seen it. I see a bunch of people that are, sitting in newsrooms or in their house, behind, their walls, going, oh, yeah, this isn't really good. None of those people are out there stopping the other people. Not one of them. You don't see Maxine Waters. What's she doing? Doing nothing except for flaming the fire, flaming the fuel, right? And throwing more fuel on the fire. I kind of mixed my two things up there, but that's what they're doing and not doing what it takes to get out there. I've been on the street. I was in LA riots. I spent a week in LA during the riots, being a part of the LA riots, getting rocks thrown at us, Molotov cocktails. My dog was out there trying to keep people back from fires that they were setting at the 7-Eleven as we were driving by. I was there to protect the firemen who were trying to put out the fires. They were throwing rocks at the firemen. The firemen were wearing vests because they were getting shot at. I spent a week in that mess. So don't tell me what it's like or what it's not like to be in this type of situation. I feel sorry and I'm sad for the officers, because that was me during the LA riots during Rodney King times, and seeing what they're going through. It's a no-win situation, right? You try to arrest somebody and you're racist. You have to beat somebody back because they won't back up, or you bite your dog with them, bite them with your dog, and now you're racist. But you listen, this person just got done setting fires, or they're throwing rocks, or they're throwing bricks, and they're throwing Molotov cocktails. What do you want us to do as police officers? But we need the help of the Black community, Mexican community that are against racism and violence. We need the politicians out there on the street, not behind some wall at a podium saying all nice, really flowery things, but yet doing nothing about it. That's what needs to happen. Barbara is on, my cousin. Her son, has been in LA till 2 a.m. and now in Santa Monica. Hey, we have similar stories we can tell each other now about what it's like to be out there with the stupid people. Yes. Thank you, Barbara, for sharing that. Oh my gosh. So where am I at here? I want to make sure I'm on task, because I wanted to eventually get to the eventual message here. There have been many Black leadership bringing politics. Oh, so all right. So let's bring some politics in there. And this is where I think some of the discussions go haywire, because people say you can't bring politics into all this. You absolutely have to bring politics in this. Where did most of this start? It all happened in Democrat-run cities and states. This is where most of it begun. And so back in my comments to the earlier discussion that I was commenting on, it entered into the part. I said, why aren't you pissed? Why are you pissed at Donald Trump, who has done probably more for the Black community than any other president? I know I'm going to get messages from that too. I don't care, because it's the truth. Again, I can name them. I can't name them off the top of my head, but I have them written down about many of the things that he's tried to put through, even with pushback from Democrats who didn't want these things to happen. And he would promote them anyway and get them done regardless of what the Democrats would allow to happen. They were always having pushback. They didn't want to have him have success in the Black community. Imagine how much more success that he could have in the Black community if they wouldn't have blocked him from doing much of the stuff he was trying to do. So you have to have politics under this, because one of the biggest problems that started this whole thing, and I'm going to go through, I have it here, is to to start this all off, and I brought this up the other day, and it's important to bring it up because where this all began is in Minneapolis, right? Where you have a white officer, former officer, moron, do something as incredibly insensitive and deadly to a suspect by having his knee. He had two other officers on the body. The guy can't breathe, right? They totally suffocated him with his own body weight and their body weight, and then with the neck, knee on the neck, right? Very clear. You got video from all angles. You have witness statements. You have probably their statements that they may have made spontaneously as they were leaving the scene, or even actively still trying to get him into the ambulance. Certain things can be said, and those can all be used. All of that stuff. Every one of these following people had this information, and so we had a Democrat mayor, a Democrat prosecutor, a Democrat attorney general, a Democrat union, a Democrat governor. And the only person who acted quickly was President Trump by sending FBI and DOJ over there to make sure that this got investigated quickly and come to some resolution. But no, even with that, they're still blaming Donald Trump. But it was the Democrat governor, mayor, DA who chose to slow roll it for God knows whatever reason from Monday until Friday, which is really what is causing most of this unrest, because people wanted answers quickly because they could see on video, even with one angle, that we had a problem here. And there was nothing wrong with arresting that officer on day 2. They could have arrested him on day 1, right? The day that it happened that night, they could have gone to his house and arrested him because they know from past videotaped arrests where something like this has happened, this kind of stuff happened. They already know. We knew this was going to happen. But they chose not to take action. But those are Democrats. It wasn't Republicans. This is why you have to have politics enter this, because the liberal Democrats are the ones that are causing most of the unrest based on their past history of not doing very much for the Black community in Chicago, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Baltimore, in some of these heavily populated areas of Black communities where they have the most poverty, the most shootings, the most drug problems, the worst schooling systems, right, are all run by Democrat politicians. This is why you have to have politics brought into this discussion. And this is why I brought it into the discussion earlier. Yet, of course, that was when they started calling me an asshole and a Trump supporter. But I said, this is what, and I was just making a statement that this is what you really need to be looking at. Why aren't you, the person who was having the discussion, why aren't you asking the questions of the prosecutor? Why aren't you asking these questions of the mayor and the governor who have had control of these areas for 10 and 20 years? That we have these conditions in these cities that have caused much of this. You have who was on just a minute ago? It was the chief of police for Minneapolis, Minnesota, who has one of the most corrupt police departments that I know of. As I've had a couple cases at Minnesota, and you have a guy who's been investigated 13 times for use of force under color of authority, and he's still a police officer. Yet you have a Black police chief of police who's done nothing about, hey, listen, when somebody gets 2 or 3 of these things, we really need to begin looking at them as whether they should be a cop here, right? How did it get to 13? How did this ever get to 13 to where that on the 14th time he could kill somebody? Those are the questions, not whether Donald Trump mentioned anything about George Floyd or anything that was happening when he got the incident. That's not the question you should be asking. That's not the thing that you should be enraged about. That's not the thing that you should be posting on Facebook saying, that's it. I can't wait until Donald Trump is voted out. That's not the thing you should focus on. Why aren't you focused on why the chief of police of the police department and the DA and the governor and the mayor, why have they done nothing in their community, which they are more responsible for than the president of the United States? They know what's going on a daily basis. They can see what's happening on a daily basis, and yet they've done nothing. But yet your focus is on whether the president mentioned something in his WHO press monitoring. Those are the things. Let me show you a video that's part of a bigger video, and I'm going to show you why it's important that this should have been addressed. And I don't often quote Malcolm X. I don't know that much about Malcolm X. I did study Martin Luther King. I read all of his speeches at one point in college and did some research on Martin Luther King. And again, the guy was amazing and did some incredible things. But But I really think Malcolm X says it best here in this video. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. Let me go ahead and take down my lower third. Oh, you know what? I gotta take that back. So sorry. One second, because I didn't make the audio available. My bad. Gotta stop the screen share, and I gotta do it again here. I did that yesterday 3 times. I'm so sorry. All right, let's listen to what Malcolm X has to say about. Hide some of these messages. There we go. All right, here we. Actually, I'm going to mute my mic. So I'm going to mute my mic, and I'll come back.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem, but you never see them going under the label of liberals. That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere. He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to. But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling. You take him for a friend.
Could have said it better myself. That was powerful stuff. I've never heard that before. Again, it was part of a longer video. You can see that video on my Facebook page. A very powerful statement. Just they want you to believe that they care about the Black community. They want you to believe that they care about the downtrodden and the poor, and yet they do nothing. Right? They just tax you more and do nothing. They in California, you got Gavin Newsom who spends all the money from taxes not on improving certain areas of Los Angeles and San Francisco and solving the homeless problem. But he takes all this money that has been raised in other programs and puts it into a train that goes from Fresno to nowhere. We call it the train to nowhere. Billions of dollars has been spent on this train, yet it's gone nowhere. They've dug tunnels and bridges and overpasses, and yet there's still no freaking train, right? You got morons in the Democratic Party, liberal Democrats that are doing stupid stuff that have done nothing to help the liberal community or the Black community. And until you wake up and understand that the liberals will do nothing for you, they have shown over the 2, 3, 4 decades that they've had control over many of these cities and states, that they've done nothing for those cities and states, nothing but cause chaos and increase homicides and reduce the education of the constituents that are within that community. That is all they've done. And I know this sounds like rhetoric. I know this sounds very strong, but I'm telling you, based on what I've researched, I've never been so much into finding out what really is happening in our world than I have lately, that this is what truly is happening. Are the Republicans the solution to everything? No. I don't like Lindsey Graham anymore. I used to like him a little bit, but he's not doing much for us either, right? We have many Republicans who are morons too. We got Mittens, they call him Mittens, Mitt Romney, who is an idiot, right? We got a couple Republicans who are just, again, the Republicans aren't all we are the solution to our problems. We are. They are not. Right? They work for us. We decide when somebody like Adam Schiff has been in there, and doing nothing. This is, for the last 3 years, he's done nothing but investigate the president based on lies. Right? He needs to be voted out. He doesn't get to tell us what to do. We get to tell him what we want and what we don't want by voting him out. But yet we continue to vote for these people over and over. Nancy Pelosi is another moron. Look at her. Look at the city that she's representing that has the highest homeless population. It's increased by 300% since COVID-19 has started, and it's been nothing but a disaster. She is nothing but a disaster. And yet we believe that they are in control of us. The Republicans aren't in control of us. The Democrats aren't in control. We are in control of ourselves. And until we take a stand and say we no longer want this kind of stuff, not by burning up police cars, not by destroying buildings, not by destroying infrastructure, not by spitting on cops and throwing Molotov cocktails at them, but by demonstrating through peace, by voting people out of office and voting new people into office, making sure that we get people in there to get things done. This is what changes things. MLK, Martin Luther King, he changed things through peace and discussion and movements. It was none of this crap that's going on today. Really, none of this stuff going on today. All right. oh man, I don't know if I'm doing any good or if this means anything or anybody cares, and it will not change anything. See, look what I just said. See, even sometimes I think that I've gone, I don't care. I'm just going to, I give up, but I don't give up. I'm using this platform. I'm reaching the last video that I did had, I think we're up to 4,000 people watch that video or watch that Facebook Live. So we're going to do one thing. All right. So I got 3 more things I want to talk about. 3 more things. The one thing that will never allow you to improve your conditions as a human being, as a race, as a community, is that if you constantly have a victim mentality. And I see this, and in this discussion that I had earlier on some of these posts, and not in just that, but I'm picking on that one post because it's the one that just is the freshest, is that there were always how it always ended up was that they were a victim, right? We're always full of victims. The Democrats want you to be a victim. They want you to feel victimized. They keep telling you you're a victim, right? They keep telling you you're a victim. They keep telling you you're a victim of Donald Trump. They tell you you're a victim of Devin Nunes. They tell you you're a victim of the Republican Party. They tell you you're a victim of your circumstances. You're a victim because you're poor, right? No. I could have been, and now we're going to get to how I started this whole thing, right? When I grew up, I was called Jap because of my eyes. When I became a police officer, I was called the Mexican, right? The Mexican will go do that. Mexican, hey, go get me a coffee. Mexican, you're going to sit in the front of the briefing room. You can't sit back up here with us white people, right? And I just said, whatever, that's not my problem, right? I was never a victim. This person who they said these things about, you know what happened in the first 2 years as a police officer? I got voted Officer of the Year. You know what happened in the next year after that? I got awarded the best officer of the year, whatever, what is it called? Distinguished Service Award. I forgot what I got. It's a medal that you get. It's like the highest honor you can get as a police officer within a police department. In my 3rd or 4th year, I forget what year it was, I got the Distinguished Service Award at my police department. This is a guy who was called Mexican. This was a guy that grew up being called a Jap. This was a guy who got Fs in math. Sorry, kids, don't listen to this. I was a very poor educated in high school. I passed and I got through high school, but then I ended up graduating number 5 out of 50 in the police academy. And all that could have ended if I would have been ever the victim, right? My dad beat me pretty good a couple times, really, but it caused me not to steal ever again. All those things happened. I nearly died a couple times because of stupid things that I did and that kind of stuff. But what ended up happening, I didn't allow myself to be a victim. I know that at any time during my life, I could have allowed myself to be a victim and not move forward. Right? The only way not to move forward is by continuing to be a victim. And I keep hearing over and over again, I've never been black, right? I've never been pulled over because I've been black. I've never been thrown on the ground and handcuffed and kicked because I've been black. I admit that. And I am sorry. But I've had very many colleagues and people I've worked with who have got high in leadership and the lieutenants and captains and sergeant. I have friends who do well in business who are black. And the reason they were able to do that because they were never victims. Never victims of being black. You can just be black. You can just be Mexican. You can just be Chinese and Asian and American Indian. But those who are successful in those races, no matter if it's black or not, is if you refuse to be a victim. It doesn't matter if one day you got pulled over and thrown on the ground. It matters. I know it does, but it really doesn't matter in the overall grand scheme of things, because if you lay there on the ground and cry and now you can't move on because you were a victim one night, then nothing's ever going to change. But that is the thing I continually hear from people who really do not want change is that, poor me. They keep holding me back. I have a family member who for years said that every she had like 5 or 6 jobs. And with every job, she had a horrible supervisor. Every job. Whether it was Chipotle, whether it was, if I start naming them, then the person will know who I'm talking about. Name some other things. The car wash, the hair salon, right? No matter where she worked, no matter what type of business it was, the supervisors were morons and were always picking on her, right? Always picking on her or him, right? Always. I'm a victim. I want to work and I'm the best. I'm the best in the office. I'm the best person. I'm the best salesperson, but the supervisor hates me. All right, I might have believed it on the first one and maybe on the second one. But now that you're on your fifth or sixth job, and again, you have one of the most horrible supervisors ever, really? And that's when I sat down and said, listen, I really find it hard to believe that everywhere you've worked, you've never had a supervisor that you could work with. Have you ever thought about standing in front of a mirror and evaluating yourself and your work ethic and your attitude and the things you say, how you dress, how you comb your hair, how you smell, when you show up for work, when you leave work, how much vacation you take? Have you thought about all those things? And have you done your very best to be on time, to be the last person, be the person that locks the door? Never be the person who has the door held open for them. Be the person that locks the door. Be the person that sets the alarm. Be the person that when you come in, people say, wow, you look great. You are ready for action. You have somebody say, you know what, no matter what I can say about this person, man, they're always really well dressed and they're always so nice to the customer. How about being that person? Right? But instead, what I hear constantly is that everybody's picking on you, that you can never get through a job. You can never last in a job because you always have lousy supervision. It seems to me that the supervision is trying to help you by telling you need to be on time, by telling you that you need to make sure and count the registers so that you always have the right amount of money at the end of the day, that there's something going on, that something needs to be fixed. And then that's when you take action, not then you go, oh, why are you picking on me? You're trying to say I don't count or I don't know how to count? You're saying I don't know how to dress? No, the supervisor is telling you, you know what? We have a standard here. We have a policy here. And you chose to take this job with this policy. And now your job is to uphold that policy because you want us to give you a paycheck at the end of every 2 weeks. And to get that paycheck, you follow the policy. You show up on time. Right? You make sure and count the money back correctly. And if you're having trouble doing them with that, you get help. Can I do this? Or maybe not, the register is not for me. Maybe being on the floor, being a salesperson is a better place for me. Or being a greeter, being a host or hostess is a better place for me. But being a victim every time you go out of this world is never going to allow you to progress. It's going to end. You're going to end up being one of those people breaking down a window at Target and stealing the big screen TV. Those are all victims. They're victimizing other people because they are feeling like they're victims. If you're a winner, you don't victimize other people. You help other people. You pick people up when they're down. When you're not a victim and you're a winner, you pass on the winnings. Stop being a victim. I think part of racism sometimes is based on you feeling like you're a victim. And I'm sorry, I know, send the messages, tell me that I'm racist and tell me I'm wrong. But I think a little part of racism has to do with you being a victim. Not all. There's some bad cops out there. That cop, bad, right? You can't come back on me and say, well, you're doing supporting this cop and not George Floyd. No, that cop needs to be imprisoned, not for murder 3, for murder 2. Again, a Democrat DA chose to charge him with murder 3. Murder 2, I've read the statute. Based on what I've seen and what I've seen as far as evidence, there is no way that he should be charged with murder 3. He should be charged with murder 2. And if they want to drop it, if the jury, if the judge, if the process of coming to an agreement on a plea bargain then drops it down to a 3, then that's what can be done. But now you're at a 3. Where do you go from a 3? You go to assault and battery under color of authority, which is not nearly as bad as murder. Do you see what I'm saying? You cannot start with the lowest possible crime. You have to start with the highest possible crime. Murder 1 is not possible because you didn't have malice aforethought. At least it's going to be very difficult to prove. We've not been able to see that. But we have seen murder 2. Charging him with murder 3 is a horrible, horrible mistake. And it's a Democrat DA who has done that. All right. So I got 2 more things. Lastly, closing. Closing the door to communication will never solve everything. And this is, again, what happened with this conversation that I was talking about with the Facebook post, with when I'm dealing with, as a police officer dealing with victims or suspects of crimes, is that because I did not see it their way, because I didn't buy into their victimization of what they believe, that they're being a victim of, because I didn't see that, and I countered with facts and truth, and would say, like this person I was talking about with their job, with the supervision, they never worked with somebody that was a supervisor that would allow them to work, and always was picking on them. And we would get in arguments because she goes, well, that person would say, well, how come you never see my side of the story? Because that's not my job. As your friend or your family member, that is not my job to see your side. My job is to love you and respect you enough to tell you the truth. That is my job. Same as on these Facebook posts. I told the person I said, I love you as a friend, and I understand that you're hurt. I understand that what you're seeing on television and what happened to George Floyd is painful for you. I understand that, but my job as your friend and loving friend, even though we barely know each other, is not to just simply agree with you. What kind of friend is that? What kind of family member is that? What kind of community member is that if I only just agree with you? My job is to help you, to be stronger, and to understand, you know what, on this case, you're wrong. In this case, you're wrong. You need to look at these other things, and I have to point them out to you, because if I don't point them out to you, you will never see them. You are so blinded by anger and blame and victimization that you're having trouble letting the truth in. You're having trouble seeing that there's another side of the story that you really need to be aware of. And so you close down communication by simply saying you're an asshole, you're a Trump lover, you're a Republican, and you're a lemming, is what I've been called. And that's you shutting down communication. That you saying, I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't want to hear the truth. I don't want to hear what you have to say because it may change my mind. So instead, you're an asshole. Instead, you're a racist. Instead, you're a bigot. Instead, you're a Nazi. Instead, you're a baby killer. All the things that I've been told. That is the thing that stops the conversation, right? That is your guard you put up because you're afraid that I'm being honest with you. And you shut down communication. If you want the police, if you want politicians, if you want maybe even people like me to help heal this wound of racism, then there has to be communication. There has to be a little give and take. Hey, you always beat us down. Well, not always. Here are situations where we didn't do that. No, you're an asshole. No, here are things that we have done in the past to kind of get through this. And if we can come to an agreement, if we can get this information out to the community so they can actually see that we have made some improvements, that we want to help, that we want to improve relationships, if you can see that and not stop communication, then we can move forward. And then I will accept some of the things you have to say. But once you put up that wall and you stop all communication, nothing gets done. Right? These discussions, I was very clear in my message on the posting, is that I love this discussion. I am so thankful that we've had a series. There's a couple of people that I know that are friends that were part of that, they could see, because I saw like these little hearts and, thumbs up during the discussion. So there are people there that private messaged me and said, wow, that was really good. And, this kind of stuff. And I said, it was really good because we were having it for a moment. We were having a discussion, and then bam, and you're an asshole. What'd I say? It was going so well, and then communication stopped, and that was it. So I think I think she unfriended me. Who knows? But see, that's what happens, right? Communication stopped. You start making an impact. You start, having a communication, and you hit a wall. So but we can't continue to do that. If you continue to stop communication, there will never be any resolution. If you stop communication, there will never be any resolution. Most of these things are coming off the top of my head. I don't know if they're good or not, but let me see. All right, last thing. And I'm not sure if I think this is maybe just a little side note to me. Police and city. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the one thing in the end, And this is where I have no idea where these cities continue to drop the ball. But when you have the police, the city, the county, the state, it starts with leadership, right? We have very poor leadership. Whether it's Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter as long as there's good leadership. I know some Democrats that are great leaders. I've mentioned a couple on some of the posts that I've put up on my personal page, on Twitter, and on some of the other accounts that I use for communicating these things. There's some great in Black Democratic leadership who are fantastic. They've taken a stand and said, listen, I'm not going to follow the herd and just blame Trump for all my problems. I'm not going to follow the herd and blame police for all my problems, because I have had some great experiences with police. Of course, there's a few jerks. Of course, there's a few jerk Republicans. There's a few jerk Democrats, but that's not going to keep me from being able to praise the opposing party, because there are some good things we can do together once we begin to communicate and agree. Right. And so when we get leadership, whether it's Democrat or Republican or independent or the Green Party or whatever you want, I don't care, that it takes a very good leadership role of communicating. We have to do a better job with our police departments in cutting down these there's a few words that I want to use, and I want to be very careful because I know I've said a lot of words, but it's just really a culture. There's other things I can call it, but you got to find these culture problems, like the culture of beating up on people needlessly for long periods of time and not letting up. It just doesn't happen to Blacks. It happens to whites. It happens to Mexicans, and I've seen it, and I've had cases involving it. That you got to identify a problem and solve it quickly. I don't know why it continues. I don't have the answer for, because I know in Anaheim we are very fortunate that we had some cultures. Trust me, we had some problems, and I identified them, and I quickly found myself outside the walls of Anaheim Police Department. They found a reason to retire me, and I got retired. So trust me, I know what can happen to somebody who has an idea that says, "Listen, this is wrong," and you tell a lieutenant, a captain, a chief of police that what is happening within the police department is wrong. They will find a way to show you the door. Right. But when you have good, solid leadership in regard to the mayor, city council, chief of police, deputy chief, captains, lieutenants, and sergeants, and you all work together, right, to solve the problem, the people that are actually handling the calls, which are the police officers, and identifying problem officers, bad cultures, and move them around. A culture can be 2 or 3 cops within a sector. Right. You can have 2 or 3 officers in a sector who are really heavy handed, and they go out there and do some things. Now, strong police work is welcome. I believe in strong police work, going in there with force and a command presence and getting crap done. But you have to do that with an understanding that there's times not to be that way, right? To have a balance. But when you now begin to treat everybody as a 1%er, which is the 1% that are just the dregs of society, and you forget there's people that aren't in that 1%, right? When you begin to think that everybody deserves to be treated like slime and snot and dirt, then we have a problem. Then you begin to build a culture. Those cultures need to be broken up quickly before they begin to take hold. If you allow a culture to take hold, it'll begin to grow like a cancer within a police department. And we have leadership who have not done a good job of doing that in some of these cities. I've seen it in places like Baltimore as an investigator in some crimes that were occurring in Baltimore, and of course in Minnesota, and then Chicago. I've had many cases. Those are some of the bigger problems I've seen. And then there's a couple other cities, which I won't go into all the cities, where they have a culture that is much bigger and should have been broken down a long time ago. And so we need to have better leadership. They need to clean up Minneapolis Police Department. They need to begin to release, fire, terminate, arrest some of the supervision that was overseeing the officer who was fired and arrested. They need to be fired and arrested, possibly, because they allowed this to occur. They have a hand in the death of George Floyd. I'm here to tell you, this is not a popular idea. My career would be done if I mentioned that and I was an officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I would be done. All right. But I'm just telling you, there is some supervision. The direct supervision of this officer probably needs to be arrested and fired, or fired and arrested. All right. So I want to end, and I didn't mention this in the beginning, and I'm sorry if there's I would like you to watch just a little bit longer. I'm going to be interviewing a singer-songwriter tomorrow who wrote a song. He's part of our church. He's part of our worship team. I love the song. Every time I listen to it, I tear up a bit. I will be interviewing him tomorrow. There's some words that are in there that are very powerful. It's called More. And I'm going to play a video from our Easter service at our church. He's a very cool guy. I love my church. What I also left in there is a prayer that happens to, I think, fit for what is it we're going through now. There's got to be more than this and what I'm seeing on TV, which is Philadelphia rioting right now, what I'm seeing. That there's got to be more than what we've gone through with the pandemic and what is going on today. There's got to be more. And so I want to leave on the prayer that Pastor Kyle is saying, and then following his prayer is the song by Matt Roden, who I'm going to interview tomorrow about that song, as long as everything goes well. And I just want you to listen to it and listen to the words and think about that. And then join me tomorrow as I interview Matt about his song. I think it's powerful. You may not like it. I love it. It brings tears to my eyes every time I listen to it. And I hope this doesn't have my take down my whole Facebook Live, because I don't have necessarily permission to run this. I have permission from him, but I think we'll be fine. So I'm going ahead and play this. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you watching and spending the time with me. I appreciate all the comments. I didn't get a chance to look at all the comments. I don't. This is a hard, difficult subject matter. I wrestled with it for the last 2 days, whether I would do this or not. But today, based on this discussion I had earlier, I could not do it. And I just had so many thoughts, whether they're right or not, I don't know. But I'm going to play this song. Please listen to it. And then following the song, I'm just going to end the broadcast. So I want to tell you all thank you, and I appreciate you. But Kyle's going to say a prayer. Following the prayer, the song starts, and I really do think you'll like it. Listen to the words, and join me tomorrow when I interview Matt. All right, here we go.
This is a very different kind of Easter than any of us has ever experienced. Easter's usually about family and picnics and egg hunts for the kids, and all those things look a little different. But even in that, you've probably left yourself wondering.
There is a chance that in my haste, I did not click the right button. I want to just make sure. Were you hearing it okay? Because there's a chance. I panicked and I started to think, I don't think that I checked the box that allows you to hear the audio. So just in case, I wanted to stop it. I'll try to back it up to where he started that prayer. So I apologize. If you were hearing it, I just panicked and thought, did I not click that button? I couldn't remember. So I apologize, but I just want to make sure you could hear it. All right, here we go. I can see that I checked the box. It's all ready to go now. All right, here we go. I'm just going to mute my mic. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Community. Some of them can't even leave their houses. And so we've had volunteers that when they're at the store, they'll pick up bags of food and just leave them on the porch for them. And I'm just so proud of how our church is loving our neighbor well in this time. And so I want to invite you guys to continue to be generous. It's a way that we get to show profoundly God's hope and love to the world. You'll see there's a couple ways to do that. You can just text Friends Church to the number that you see on your screen. Or secondly, you're already online, there's a way to give online. So right after the service, you can go on there and be a part of the story that God's writing through Friends Church. This is a very different kind of Easter than any of us has ever experienced. Easter's usually about family and picnics and egg hunts for the kids, and all those things look a little different. But even in that, you've probably left yourself wondering, isn't there more to life than what we're experiencing right now? That's a question that's going through my mind. Isn't there more to life? Isn't there more to Easter? And it creates this longing in us. And for many of us, it's a longing just to get back to normal. But what if there's more than normal? What if there's something beyond the normal that any one of us has ever experienced or encountered? What if God wants to use this time, this season, this day, and this moment to actually transform us, to redeem and restore the broken things in our life, to rebuild relationship and character within us, to help us become more of who created us to be in the first place? I want to invite you guys to consider that question as we continue this journey of Easter and worship. And I just want to pray for you as we continue. So if you would, wherever you're at, wherever you're watching, just just close your eyes, and I invite you to do that just to eliminate distraction. And let me just pray over you. Father, we thank you for the gift of Jesus, the gift of life, the gift of hope. And I pray for every single person that's watching, every single person that's listening. Father, you see them and you know them. You created them and you care deeply about them. And so I pray that as we continue remembering the truth and the hope and the power of Easter, God, that you would speak to every single one of us, that you build, that you restore, that you would invite to a deeper, more profound journey with you. God, for some people, this may be the first Easter that they encounter you. And so I pray that you would help them to surrender wholeheartedly to you. And God, for all of us, may we take our next step of faith with you, knowing that there is more to life than what we are experiencing today. There's more that you have for us as we walk through this journey. I pray this in the power of your name, Jesus. Amen.
There's gotta be more. There's gotta be more than this. I can't lose hope. Somebody shed light on me, 'cause all of these questions I can't answer still. I know this for sure. There's gotta be more to life than this.
Yo, I've heard it said that there is more than one season of life, but how come every morning I wake up, it feels dry? All the decisions that I make, I'm second guessing. In every corner that I take, I feel I'm robbed of a blessing. It's like my soul's trying to make ends meet. Like, is there really a God above us? He just left me in the streets, 'cause everything that I touch, it needs a touch up though. Grabbing fruit for my labor, no, I'm taking out the garbage, yo. Yes, there are moments that I've tried to reason, thinking this emptiness just goes with every season. Maybe there's a God above who just won't listen. Or maybe a question or two I haven't asked that I'm missing. Like, is there more to life, or is my life at stake? Do I really have a purpose, or is it all a mistake? So I'm left to praying with an open mind, thinking there's got to be more, but it's all in time.
There's gotta be more. There's gotta be more than this. I can't lose hope. Somebody shed light on me, 'cause all of these questions I can't answer still. I know this for sure. There's gotta be more to life than this.
I'm the one that's got it all, I got the answers right. I've got money in the bank but couldn't write a check to save my life. And it's a dangerous place that I'm in, 'cause it's been taking me to places I ain't never been. With loneliness inside of me, depression and anxiety, reminding me that I can't trust this world that has lied to me. And if it's true that I've been played by the world, can I really trust the creator of every boy and every girl? He's either a lunatic or a sad man, a madman or a bad man, 'cause I can't ever understand why you give your life for all men. And is this gift of love just something to borrow, or is it something that has substance that can drown out my sorrow? 'Cause I'm exhausted of the mind games. I make another move and life is calling checkmate. I'm getting sick of all the heartache and the blind dates. With these questions I can't answer, hoping someday
There's gotta be more. There's gotta be more than this. I can't lose hope. Somebody shed light on me, 'cause all of these questions I can't answer still. I know this for sure. There's gotta be more to life than this.
no matter the headspace you find yourself in, there's a God who is and was and has always been. He's the antidote to the wrestling inside. Jesus came to die and raise in 3 so we could have life. He took the weight of the world so we confide in him. He promised to walk with us in valleys when the future's dim. It's his resurrection that can redirect us, giving us hope in the worst of circumstances. And not that we would come to him just to fix us up, but he loves his children so, and he never gives up. So when you think that you have finally reached the end of your rope, listen closely to me, friend, there's some things you should know. He's the father to the fatherless, hope to the hopeless, the joy to the joyless, the sight to the sightless, the peace to the peaceless, the might to the mightless, the light in the darkness. Hear me saying, friend, that Jesus is enough. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You can have all this world. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. Give me Jesus. You can have all this world. You can have all this world. You can have all this world. Jesus.